Hello, everyone. Happy 3-day weekend. I know I assigned you homework for the weekend. It's not too bad. So, like I said, make sure that you listen to the entire video. That way you know what you're supposed to read. Because, like I said, you're not going to read the entire chapter 2. You're going to read portions of it. So, we did watch the movie prior to finishing the novel, and I did that. Not just because I was sick and not well, but to give you kind of just an idea of the time that this book is written in, and also just giving you kind of a point of perspective to draw from as you read, okay? So obviously I know you know the ins and outs of this book in the sense of like how it starts and ends, but there's a lot of detail that you're going to notice that the movie missed. So please take the time to read. Don't skip out. There will be quizzes on this, okay? So, the summary of chapter 2. We finished chapter 1 with Jem being dared to touch Boo's house. He does, right? And after he does, something stirs in Boo's house. Very subtle, kind of creepy. But now we're moving on, all right? The chapter moves on. We don't really get more information than that. Dill goes back home for the school year. He only comes back during the summer. And Scout begins school, which is not at all what she expects. This doesn't really get portrayed in the movie at all, so this is actually really good that we're reading this together. Scout's teacher is Miss Caroline Fisher. She's new to teaching, and she is mortified that Scout knows how to read and write because she feels that she's kind of too ahead. She doesn't really have things to teach her because she already knows how to read and write, and being at such a young age. And she's very discouraging about it, which a teacher should never be, discouraging students that are ahead, right? So poor Scout gets really, really hurt by it. She feels like she did something wrong. Scout does, and this is actually the part that we're going to be reading, sorry about that, we're going to be reading together, and she basically gets in trouble for trying to coach and tell Miss Fisher what is socially acceptable in regards to Walter Cunningham asking for money. Or not asking for money, but Miss Fisher offering Walter Cunningham money because he doesn't have anything for lunch. So this is kind of like a slower chapter. It's not very, very adventurous, but it's important because it talks a lot about social standing and social norms in the society. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the reading. You're actually, if you were to open up your novel, you're going to start on page 25. And in the middle of it, you're going to see a paragraph that starts with Walter Cunningham's face. So we're going to read the blue part together, and there's some pink that you'll have to read on your own, and it's not even that much. So please, follow along, listen, read along, and yeah, it'll go pretty quickly, all right? Walter Cunningham's face told everybody in the first grade he had hookworms. His absence of shoes told us how he got them. People caught hookworms. Well, I kind of went a little too ahead, sorry. People caught hookworms going barefooted in barnyards and hog wallows. If Walter had owned any shoes, he would have worn them the first day of school and then discarded them until midwinter. He did have on a clean shirt and neatly mended overalls. "Did you forget your lunch this morning?" asked Miss Caroline. Walter looked straight ahead. I saw a muscle jump in his skinny jaw. "Did you forget it this morning?" asked Miss Caroline. Walter's jaw twitched again. "Yev'm," he finally mumbled. Miss Caroline went to her desk and opened her purse. "Here's a quarter," she said to Walter. "Go and eat downtown. You can pay me back tomorrow." Walter shook his head. "No, thank you, ma'am," he drawled softly. Impatience crept into Miss Caroline's voice. "Here, Walter, come get it." Walter shook his head again. When Walter shook his head a third time, someone whispered, "Go on and tell her, Scout." I turned around and saw most of the town people and the entire bus delegation looking at me. Miss Caroline and I had conferred twice already, and they were looking at me in the innocent assurance that familiarity breeds understanding. I rose graciously on Walter's behalf. Miss Caroline. What is it, Jean Louise? Miss Caroline, he's a Cunningham. I sat back down. What, Jean Louise? I thought I had made things sufficiently clear. It was clear enough to the rest of us. Walter Cunningham was sitting there, lying his head down. He didn't forget his lunch. He didn't have any. He had none today, nor would he have any tomorrow or the next day. He'd probably never seen 3/4 together at the same time in his life. I tried again. Walter's one of the Cunninghams, Miss Caroline. I beg your pardon, Jean Louise? That's okay, ma'am. You'll get to know all the country folks after a while. The Cunninghams never took anything they can't pay back. No church baskets and no scrip stamps. They never took anything off of anybody. They get along on what they have. They don't have much, but they get along on it. So we're going to pause there because you're going to read the rest as to a little bit more about the Cunninghams, and there will be a question on the homework about it, so make sure you read. But basically, Scout, in her best intention, was trying to protect Walter's pride and kind of include her teacher a little bit on the Cunningham history, and we'll see how she goes with that. So you're going to read all the way up down to Breed of Men. As the Cunninghams had no money to pay a lawyer, they simply paid us with what they had. Did you know, said Atticus, that Dr. Reynolds works the same way? He charges some folks a bushel of potatoes for delivery of a baby. Miss Scout, if you give me your attention, I'll tell you what entailment is. Jem's definitions are very nearly accurate sometimes. If I could have explained these things to Miss Caroline, I would have saved myself some inconvenience and Miss Caroline's subsequent mortification, but it was beyond my ability to explain things as well as Atticus. So I said, You're shaming him, Miss Caroline. Walter hasn't got a quarter at home to bring you, and you can't use any stove wood. Miss Caroline stood stock still, then grabbed me by the collar and hauled me back to her desk. Jean Louise, I've had enough of you this morning, she said. You're starting off on the wrong foot in every way, my dear. Hold out your hand. I thought she was going to spit in it, which was the only reason anybody in Maycomb held out his hand. It was a time-honored method of sealing oral contracts. By the way, this is really funny. It's meant to be comical, so if you laugh, laugh. That's a funny thing, that she thought her teacher was going to spit in her hand. Wondering what bargain we had made, I turned to the class for an answer, but the class looked back at me in puzzlement. Miss Caroline picked up her ruler, gave me half a dozen quick little pats, then told me to stand in the corner. A storm of laughter broke loose when it finally occurred to the class that Miss Caroline had whipped me. Be aware, yes, teachers back in the day were able to discipline kids like this, like with physical abuse. Obviously, not anymore. There's lots of laws that protect from this ever happening, but this was the school life that poor Scout had. When Miss and that's someone I was about to continue to read your portion. You go ahead and read that, and then we'll finish off here. My sojourn in the corner was a short one. Saved by the bell, Miss Caroline watched the class file out for lunch. As I was the last to leave, I saw her sink down into her chair and bury her head in her arms. Had her conduct been more friendly toward me, I would have felt sorry for her. She was a pretty little thing. So after this whole thing that happened with Miss Caroline, the kids laugh, and the kids, obviously someone's getting disciplined, poor Scout. The teacher next door comes by and kind of scolds Miss Caroline for having her kids be out of control, which is obviously a very embarrassing thing for a new teacher. It would be equivalent to I'm a new teacher, just got hired, and Mrs. Pack comes in and scolds me for not teaching correctly. That's a big, embarrassing. It's a very embarrassing, right? And that's why she took it so hard and cried. So this chapter, like I said, isn't super eventful. I do want you just to really get an understanding more about the Cunninghams. People of poverty tend to get treated differently. Think about people that are homeless, people that deal with just not being as privileged. All of this ties in, guys, to compassion and how we should have compassion towards people that are different from us. So this chapter is very short and sweet. I hope, like I said, go back and read the pink in your books and answer the questions that are listed for chapter 2, okay? Have a great 3-day weekend. I'm excited to jump right in with our new schedule on Tuesday, or I should say Wednesday, because I don't see you on Tuesday, and be ready to work hard because we have lots and lots to do. Excited. Have a great 3-day weekend, you guys.